no idea if that first statement made it into the video or not. Appears as such. Okay. Warning, the stream's current bitrate is 2630.66 kilobytes per second, or kilobits probably. We recommend that you use a stream bitrate of 6800. I don't know what that means. Okay. I might look into that later. I'm going to hit the recording button because I want to talk about a few things that I may turn into videos. Okay, so welcome. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. I did a live stream about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago, on how the column arrays aren't for everybody, they're not the perfect solution, etc. And I stand by that video. But I did bite the bullet, and I ordered myself a column array speaker. Now let me make this a bit bigger because I always forget that 1440p monitor, I'm streaming at 1080. The what's the word I want to look for? Scaling doesn't quite add up the same way. Anyway, I ordered myself a set, well, one for now, eventually a set if I like it, of the Powerwerks System 1, or the PWRS1, which I believe stands for Powerwerks System 1. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So let's talk about what this thing is, why I'm excited for one, and why I'm also kind of annoyed a little bit at Powerwerks themselves. So, actually, well, let me quickly do this. I've been discovering that TELUS doesn't like it when I live stream and or upload anything, and also am downloading anything. So this manual that should take a couple seconds is taking way longer than it needs to. Well, let me move this over to the screen. You guys don't need to see my thing there. Eventually we're going to need this tab though, because we're going to talk about those later. So this is taking forever. But as you can see from this short film they've got going up top here, these are kind of Powerwerks answer to like a Polar 10 sort of situation. They're not as powerful, I think, and think is a key word here. Oh god, this thing. Here's why. I'm gonna dive into this sooner than I intended, but they tell me the RMS, which is really nice. I'm happy they do that. HK Polar 10. Hey, there we go. Oh, they have their own dedicated site. Let's use that. Archives. Why is it listed as archives? Man, I wish I thought I was going to need this link earlier. Because again, as you can tell from this, like 3 megabyte manual, this is what I'm working with here. This might collapse my stream, but this is why I have a hard time recommending TELUS. Although it looks like we're blah, blah, blah. But yeah, because I am doing other stuff, I'm getting super, super low. Now, I'm not even going to let this carry on. Oh, well, I won't even got to do it the old-fashioned way. Because once it goes to upload time, it'll probably crash the stream. Yeah, that's how wonderful That's how wonderful Telus is, apparently. And I can't tell if it is my my router or if it is something else. But anyway, looks like this has loaded faster. But where is specifications? So yeah, the Polar 10, if you look, it's got this sort of foot at the bottom here. We see that also in this Powerwerks, and I've heard tell that there are a few other brands that have a similar subwoofer base. I don't care, but the what's actually going on here is a bunch of these brands have a manufacturer in, I'm assuming China, that uses the same, mold essentially, or same design. Because I think there is some wood in here. I won't know till I get mine, because mine I don't think actually tells me what everything is made out of. Oh, there we go. Mechanical data. So the HK is made out of plywood, which is good, especially for that bottom section. So I'll have to see if the Powerwerks one is as well. It looks like it probably is, but failed to. Thanks, Telus. And yes, I am going to blame Telus for this, not my computer, because this also happens when I do other uploads on this computer, and it crashes the internet on anything plugged into my router. But yeah, like that's looking fairly plywood mixed with probably some plastic going on bolted into it. Like I said, I will find out when it arrives. But yeah, so over here in HK land, this is the reason why I say that this is kind of an answer to the HK, is the base is incredibly, let me move these next to each other so I can stop doing that. The base is incredibly similar in terms of design and shape and whatnot, and I'm fairly certain are made by the same manufacturer in terms of like, there's an OEM building these for a few companies, and like, if I'm wrong, yeah, they're always welcome to contact me and tell me that I'm wrong. But to my knowledge, there's another brand that I cannot remember the name of for the life of me that has a similar concept going in terms of like the base. You can see the little foot handle there, which is nice to have. I'm glad that these things have that, but that's kind of what gives away that these are very similar, is that foot sticking out the front. But then they do everything else to the specification of the order. So the HK has different top speakers, right? 6 3-inch. This has 8 3-inch. This has a compression driver. This does not. So they are going to sound very different, right? Saying that they look different or in the same box does a disservice to how different these units actually are. So the HK is going to sound completely different. This is what I mean by you can't always just go by the form factor and the look. You can't even go by them being made in the same factory, because whoever is building these boxes is building them to the specifications of the, end user, or however you want to put it. End user not being me as the end user in this case. It's been a long week. I'm trying to remember the name for, the retailer. There we go. Right? The supplier, whoever, right? The middleman that actually tells them, hey, make me this thing. Right? So these guys went to the same OEM and had something different built. So I'm not expecting it to sound exactly the same as a Polar 10, especially because these are quite a different price point. I am going to double check how different of a price point. My prices get a little wonky because Yeah, so at time of recording, the HK Polar 10 in Canada is about $300 more expensive. Because these, at time of recording, the Powerwerks are selling for $800, where these are selling for $1,100. So there's that. Now, here's the reason why I have no idea as well if these are going to sound anything near each other, and this is why it's like really, I hate it. It's almost impossible to compare any of these. So, amplifier peak output 2,000 watts, peak 1,050, 350 watt RMS. Hey, this did load. Sweet. Yeah, so this doesn't mean that this is going to be twice as loud. I always have to stress that. I have no idea what the RMS is of this. There we go. Okay, RMS 500. So we've gotten quite a bit closer in terms of figuring out what the heck is going on here. If I was trying to compare these two units to each other, we've got 500 watts versus 350 watts. Much closer, both from just a percentage standpoint and from a actual watt, blah, blah. Now, this max SPL here, peak 3. Scroll down, 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 down. Where is it? Oh, don't do this to me. Mechanical data. Subwoofer. This. I hate it when they do this. I'll never understand this decision. They have this 3 as a note and then don't have the underline. So they, if I do go and dig through the manual on this, we can find what this 3 is referring to. I don't like that this is such a pain to find. I don't know what they're doing here. Real dumb. But anyway, we now know this puts out theoretically 127 decibels. Right? I'm going to be getting roughly half the power. So everything else being equal, I'm looking at 124 decibels. Is it everything else going to be equal? No. But it's impossible to compare these two. Now this one does have the RMS, speaker protections. It tells us a bunch of different info, but frequency range 43 to 18 kilohertz, sweet. And then the Powerwerks one, spec sheet, 4,000 to 40 hertz to 16 kilohertz. There we go. That makes perfect sense comparing these, because although we have some fairly small drivers, these 3-inch compression drivers, or however they're, are they technically, yeah, I guess they would technically still be compression drivers. I don't even know why they're calling this a horn though. I don't even know. I don't know if these qualify as compression drivers, guys. Because compression drivers is like a type of high frequency. Anyway, so as you can see, some of the specs on these get a little bit annoying, right? It's just impossible to compare apples to apples across these ranges. And one of the reasons why, like I said, I'm a bit nervous about this Powerwerks, one is, even though it's using the same form factor-ish as the HKs, which I do like those HKs, no high frequency driver, which this actually is listed, in my opinion, better than the actual manual, does mean we don't have as high of frequency output. So you are going to lose some of that upper presence range. Whether you care about that or not, that's yet to be seen by myself. I do find some stuff in that range can get rolled off without too much consequence. And at the volumes I'm planning on using this at, I should be okay. But if it ends up being a little muddy because it's missing stuff above the 15 range, 16 in this case, I may have to do some soul searching on it. But something to keep in mind. Here is the big thing to keep in mind. When you see something that is, oh, it only puts out 16 kilohertz. It's going to take a while to load. Sure. Eat all the cookies. SM57 caps out at, this is why I had 15 in my head. It caps out at 15 kilohertz. So this Powerwerks should be able to put out the full frequency spectrum of the most popular microphone ever built. I can live with that. So, like I said, it's just impossible to compare these darn things, even though they look similar, because they're built so differently. But I can't distrust this spec sheet as much as some might, because, 16 kilohertz, that seems really, really low. It's like, well, the most popular microphone ever made only picks up to 16. Is a violin or, a cymbal going to sound as good through this with a proper condenser microphone? No, probably not. But if the mid-range and the spoken word frequencies of this thing are nice and clear, as I hope they are, I can live with that high frequency roll-off. But I'm a little all over the place today. These HKs, 127 decibels. Again, I don't know if that is, now it says peak, so I'm assuming that is from the 2000 watts, and probably this is the classic. If I track it down in the manual, I'm willing to guess that, frequency range is at -6, guys. And then this is frequency response. They don't list it, but frequency response is normally ±3. Do I have to just take back everything I just said about how, I'm not too worried about, because this -6 number, God, I hate this. This QSC, I will forever hate you for doing this to the industry. It used to be -3, because -3 is the noticeable decibel that we can perceive, right? So if I show you two audio files and one of them is 1 decibel louder, you probably won't notice. If one of them is 2 decibel louder, you might, but you pretty much should notice if I have it at 3 decibels. So having the roll-off listed at -3 always makes sense, because that tells you your really super usable frequency. And when I say roll-off, that's exactly what it means. It just rolls down at the top and bottom in terms of the frequency response. So neither of these have those, although interestingly enough, this is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit nervous about this Powerwerks. As mentioned, there's no SPL rating anywhere on here. It has this lower frequency response, but I'm operating under a slight assumption that it's a -3. And if it is, it actually keeps up surprisingly well against the Polar. Although the Polar's frequency or crossover frequency is different too. Interesting. 200 versus the 180. Now, what that does mean for me, I am considering running this system ones, if I do like them, with a crossed over subwoofer. They actually will be more effective. Interesting. But anyway, so again, comparing audio stuff is just nearly impossible when you get into these column arrays, because they're just built so differently, right? We've got one that has, high and mid frequency drivers. We have another one that only has the low frequency and then a full frequency from 200 hertz up. So I don't know where this, that's another weird thing here. I wonder Okay, so that's system. Did they have... Interesting. And so, yeah, like I said, this one has a proper compression driver. These other ones are cone speakers. Powerwerks, get your shit together. These aren't compression drivers. I don't even know if... Can you make a neodymium compression driver? Does that work? Yeah. Again, it's stuff like this that makes me a bit nervous about this company. If you aren't familiar with Powerwerks, they've been around a while. They used to be Custom with a K and have changed things up and have changed the Powerwerks moniker recently. And by recently, I mean like a few years ago. And I've heard some really good things about these. So I'm looking forward to it. But I'm weary. So Powerwerks, if you are watching this, and I know you might, here's why, even though I'm even hedging that bet, here's why I think you might. There are very, very, very few videos on Powerwerks speakers. There's like 6 that I've managed to find in English. So I'm planning on doing like a full review and testing the SPL on this, which is really going to annoy my neighbors. I might do it next time I'm at a big venue and I can really pin the thing after making sure that it can do enough for moving to that venue. Because as always, when it comes to these column arrays, they are not ideal for bigger and bigger and bigger venues, even if they can put out the volume, because the output on these tends to be really, really wide in terms of sound disbursement. And yeah, that is why you can't, they compare them to a point sources. They narrow that in, and so they throw better. So if you're dealing with a long room, don't use column arrays. I did the whole thing on those. But anyway, I'm gonna run these things through their paces before I recommend or don't recommend them. But from what I'm seeing, I'm looking forward to it. The other big thing that I like about this Powerwerks one, there's sort of 2 aspects to it. One is it does have the DSP equalizer thing built in. I have to see how it sounds, obviously, because some DSP, you barely notice that you're clicking the button, but I've actually been kind of a DSP convert with my Wharfdales, because the DSP on those sounded great. I was really happy with how my Wharfdales sound. So I may end up being really happy with the DSP on here. They've got like speech, DJ, monitor, which I think is kind of pointless, and main. Main. Now, did they describe these anywhere in here? Because this is, again, so got Bluetooth, so you can do like a stereo pair running off of Bluetooth. Not something I care about. I run almost everything in mono. Okay, here's another thing. So, as I mentioned like 2 seconds ago before my brain just self-destructed as I head through more stuff. If you are watching this Powerwerks, and you might be because there aren't very many videos on your product out there, this manual needs some work. Now, I do like this full color, here's how everything clicks together, even though for some reason instantly makes my computer run slow. That shouldn't happen, but that's not your fault. That's my internet's fault. Tell us what the EQ settings do. Again, going back to my Wharfdale review, one of the things I really liked about that Wharfdale speaker system is they actually tell you what happens when you hit the button, right? You can find the frequency graphs. They list the changes that they do and the recommended uses for them, right? Like the bass one isn't just a bass boost. It is a bass boost for when you're running at low frequency or low volumes, because you lose bass frequencies when you do that, or at least perceived. So you up it and it makes it sound louder without actually, like, because it's changing the EQ curve. So I'm assuming the DJ preset probably ups your bass and things like that. Monitor, I'm guessing, makes it really flat. Main is just your jack of all trades, and then speech is just that. It's supposed to make it clearer for speech. I know this because I know audio. Your audience, right? Like these are a fairly inexpensive column array. Like they're not the bottom of the barrel, like a few $100 and trust us, it won't fall apart in a stiff breeze uh, category. But they're also, they're not going to be competing with, stuff twice its price. The people who are buying in this category are probably new to PA systems, right? Your new DJs or a band who needs a column array for just some ease of use situations, like we're plugging everything in and hoping it all works. That's your intended audience, so you may need some more information in your manual. On top of that, that is one thing you need, Powerwerks. Give us some actual decibel numbers and give us whether this is -3 or not. I'm giving you the benefit of a doubt that your frequency response is ±3. I don't know because you don't tell me. You have to. I'm 90% certain you need to take this compression driver thing out and just put high frequency drivers or high frequency woofers or whatever you want to call these 3 inches. I don't. I mean, I could be wrong. Again, it's been a long day, but I've only ever seen compression drivers in a horn. Compression driver. Yeah, and of course, compression driver, right? Compression drivers. Like these aren't moving a woofer. So I think that needs to be fixed. And like I said, give us our SPL levels. Because I think you might have a winner here if everything I'm seeing comes true when it comes in, right? Like I said, I'm planning on keeping one myself. Depending on I've got some invoices out in the ether that if they get paid early, I may order a second one because internally they've got a deal on them for me as the dealer because I am a Powerwerks dealer. And yeah, if I like this thing, and again, don't label this horn. You know what happened here? Powerwerks. I know exactly what happened here. Powerwerks, look at me. Look at me. Don't just copy paste using a manual that you already have if you haven't made a product like this before. That's what's going on here. Is Powerwerks has made a bunch of small portable speakers that have horns in them that probably are ran off of compression drivers. And when they typed all this stuff in, they just left things because whoever was typing this up probably didn't know 100% what they were doing. I can forgive some of that, but again, your target market, because these aren't cheap. They're inexpensive is the best way I can describe them, right? For what I hope I'm getting with mine, the price is right. Because I do think these are going to be very recommendable. So here in Canada, like I said, they're about $800. That's a few $100 cheaper than the Polar 10s, which these are kind of the competitor to. In my opinion, now, can TELUS get its act together and show me these photos that nobody can see? Probably not. So here, we're going to awkwardly have this zoomed in, unless, will it let me open a new tab? Hey, found the solution. Sometimes when you do that, it opens the image as the thumbnail, and it just ends up being like a really blown up thumbnail. This is the reason that I bought this unit. DSP, fine. Bluetooth, actually kind of handy, right? Being able to pair and link. So the idea is, and we skimmed over it briefly in the manual, and I mentioned like, oh yeah, I can do that, but it's not really something that I care too much about. For some people out there, this is actually ideal. You can Bluetooth pair this to your phone or tablet or whatever, and then link this speaker as like this speaker is going to now output the sound to another speaker. If they can do that without any latency between the two speakers, sweet. Stereo is nice to have, and especially with speakers like this that have a really wide dispersion, because you don't have as much somebody over here not hearing the same thing as somebody over here, because these are distributed nicely. Not a feature I'm probably ever going to use. I don't know. We'll find out. But it also has a link out on the panel, which we'll take a look at in a second. I believe it has a physical link out. Do they have it in that manual? Powerwerks, if you don't have a picture of the back of your unit in your manual, I'm going to be a little bit annoyed at you again. You don't. That's a bit annoying. Okay. So, oh, these finally loaded, so that's cool. So these do have, and it's taken forever to load. I'm just giving up on this. The Polar 10 does have a small mixer up top. You can plug in multiple items. And that's why I was considering those, because I am also I believe I'm technically still an HK dealer, though I haven't carried their products in a long while. But they make good stuff, and the reason that I keep bringing them up is not just the form factor of this, it's because they're very competitive in terms of price point. And I've heard the HK Polar 10s, and I really do like them. They are a great sounding unit, both for live sound and for DJs who want that super compact unit, because they put out a pretty decent amount of bass for being a 10-inch. I'd probably bump up to the 12, while having, they still have that high frequency driver in there. So this isn't me saying, oh, don't get this System 1 instead of that, but there are situations where I think it might be the case. So I can't remember, and I just closed them because it was loading really terribly, and I need to apparently preserve bandwidth. But the multiple channels here, so you can pair your Bluetooth in, or it can be this aux in, because I believe this is the independent, quote-unquote, 3rd/4th channel, where you have this stereo in here. So you can use an aux. That's probably how I would end up running this. I want to use this unit with, I've got a really small Hercules DJ controller that has this, 1/8-inch jack output on it. It'd be really nice to just be able to plug that directly into one of these things at a small event, right? Bring a small laptop, bring that little guy, plug it in. 9 times out of 10, though, I'm still using my, I can't even remember its name right now. I will remember. Newmark, my Newmark Mixstream Pro. I do really like the Mixstream Pro. I can use a RCA to 1/8-inch adapter if I want to save my other 2 channels, because the problem I've been running into on my Mixstream Pro is my microphone channels are staticky, and I don't mean in like they buzz and make extra noise kind of staticky. I mean once every 10 minutes or so I hear up as the static discharge kind of dissipates. I don't like that, especially at weddings and stuff like that. Like that happens to the wrong speaker and they get nervous, and now something that's I can't really control has, you know, lessened somebody's speech. I don't want to do that to them. So I've been using an auxiliary mixer. I've got been using this guy. I've reviewed it recently. Will my folks catch it? Yeah. So these CADs are really nice. 2 mic inputs, and then similarly they can do. This one doesn't have Bluetooth. Oh man, it's getting dusty here in my computer room. But this doesn't have Bluetooth, but it does have USB input, so I can plug a laptop directly into this. And what I've started doing is I will have like a device plugged directly into it via USB, and then I will have something plugged into it on 3 and 4, because similar to the System 1, the 3 and 4 on here is a shared input for the USB, where this is shared input for the Bluetooth. So you can't run the aux in and the Bluetooth at the same time, but it lets you choose what's going in there. So that's handy to have. I'm probably gonna use it the aux in, but then I've got 2 mic channels with treble bass and reverb. Now, I've heard the reverb on this. I'm less excited about the reverb than I thought it would be. It is done as like a karaoke echoey kind of reverb by the sound of it. But I only heard it, somebody demoing it with it pinned up. And no reverb, in my opinion, sounds really good when you have it pinned, unless you're talking like a spring reverb on a proper like guitar amp or something. So, yeah, we've got a reverb setting that I'm not stoked on, but it's there. And as long as I can get it to sound good enough where, okay, somebody's singing and I've got a tad of reverb on them, that's all I want. This may be a perfect solution. Plus, I, in the near future, am starting to offer some karaoke services beyond what I currently do. And this may end up being a bit of my, here's your karaoke system kind of setup. My personal one has adjustments and whatnot for running a monitor and a set of mains, etc., etc. Not everybody wants to do that in their house, so if I'm going to do a rentable karaoke system, I might use one of these, because one of the big advantages of a column array is because they have such a wide dispersion, you can actually hear yourself a lot better when you're nearby them. And I can set it up at somebody's house so that it's not feeding back while they're semi next to it, but they can hear themselves from the speaker. Perfect. Throw these guys up, no need for stands, and they have, I just take out some tape and I can write down like, backing track volume, and then hey, here's your microphone, right? And just label these. So that's why I'm going for one of these. I'm pretty excited about it. I've used column arrays a little bit. I have pretty limited experience with them because I have 4 or 5 point source systems, and it makes it really hard to justify one of these. But like I said, for this karaoke stuff I want to do, one of these is probably going to be perfect. I've had multiple times where I have a piano player doing a live show type thing that it just doesn't feel great to set up a mixer, monitor, speakers on stands, all for one instrument plugged in. If I can get away with, like, if this works better. I'm also planning on using this for ceremony sound as a DJ / live sound technician. So I do a lot of weddings. I want to be able to do better ceremony sound. And these, from everything I've seen, they're just more out of the way. They sound pretty darn clear for speech. I need to see what the feedback rejection is like on my microphones having one of these out there, because that is one thing I've heard about these column arrays. Some people say that they feedback less because the sound is being more like distributed more evenly through the room, blah blah blah, and less focused. So it's like you're any given location of your pickup pattern isn't going to be picking up. I don't know if I believe that. What I do believe more is because these have a wider dispersion, you have a higher chance of feedback because you can't aim them as well. We will see. Because again, for that karaoke setup, like this might not be the answer. For DJing, this might be for like really small events. Or I set this up for karaoke with this is my main, and I've got tons of monitors I can set up at somebody's feet. So that's what I'm doing with those. Now, on the subject though of the ceremony sound, I'm looking into portable power. I have a portable power solution right now that I'm unhappy with, sort of. Let me see if I can find it here. Canadian Tire. Loading. And again, I just have to state how much I hate TELUS. So I live in Canada. If you're looking at these prices here and you're like, man, those are expensive. Yeah, that's welcome to Canada. These Jackery units in particular are much less in the States because your dollar's stronger. We'll see how that goes for you. But this is like my local store that happens to carry these. And they have a bit of stuff. As you can see, they've got like a Jackery 550 unit here for 600. So I can go and I can pick up something like that. And I believe, I'll look at that in a second. Like this might be a good deal. I don't know. What I have is probably this guy. Oh, TELUS. Again, it shouldn't work this way, but when I'm uploading, my download speed crashes into the ground. It shouldn't be saturating my my Ethernet at all. I mean, it's Ethernet, and I'm running 25 megabits a second or something like that on my download speed, right? Like I'm not saturating anything. Like my internet is slow comparatively because it's super cheap, but it should be fast enough for this. What are you guys doing to me here? So this is the Jackery 550. That's the 500. And so what they're here's my cynical assumption. This is my very cynical assumption. They sell the 500 on Amazon and sell 550 in the stores so that they don't have to price match themselves. This used to happen all the time. I worked at an electronics store. We would have 5 of the same TV that were distributed to 5 different companies, right? Like some would go to this retailer, some would go to this, some would go to that. And each retailer got a model number that was slightly different, and it would be like one specification was different. One would have like, you'd have say 4 of the exact same Samsung TVs. One would have 5 HDMIs, one would have 4, one would have 3, one would have 2. And they did that on purpose. Wouldn't really change the price of the unit internally because like those HDMI ports, they do add up, right? 5 is going to be more expensive than 2, that's for sure. But then they didn't have to price match each other, even though as far as you could see from the front, like the front panel in terms of color quality, refresh rate, all that stuff, it was all exactly the same. But yeah, so that's I think what's going on here. So if I go to my local store and buy one of these, I'm paying like $600, and so this is a 550 watt hour, 500 watt output. That's pretty good. This then, if I go and I look at the 500 that's on here, because it's the one that keeps coming up, roughly that same 500 watt hour, roughly the same 500 watt output, right? This is basically the exact same thing. I'd be curious to know what is actually different about these two. Now, if you're looking into one of these, first things first, pure sine wave. That is what you need. They don't advertise it as much as they used to because it is pretty standard. Yeah, this is exactly the unit I have. These are kind of awesome, right? 2000 peak amps, 700 watts. I would not recommend one of these, despite the price. Because again, this is in Canadian dollars. For you Americans, that's under, I think it's about 180 bucks, something like that. And this is a okay solution. It has some benefits. The main one being, as you can see by the big old gator grips here, this thing can boost a car where, like, I wouldn't use a Jackery unless it was very specifically unless it very, very specifically says, yeah, you can boost a car with it. I wouldn't boost a car with it. But that problem lies in that this is using like a lead acid, I believe battery is what they're called. Essentially, same thing you got in your car, but it's like more of like a motorsport kind of size crammed in there. They actually work pretty well, but here are your two main problems with it. Number one, these are designed best to be run for fast power output, similar to your car battery, right? Where a car battery wants to start the car, wants to hit it with a high amount of power, like that. Great in a car battery situation, but a PA system, its power's fluctuating and it's jumping up from time to time, but it's a very different situation. It's especially if you're running like background music and it's just slowly draining it. These don't do as well for that type of thing. So the other downside here is that the AC outlets here are on what they call a modified sound wave or sine wave. So a proper AC/DC or proper sine wave should be like a fluctuating thing here. Now AC/DC, so I don't know why I said that because I don't know enough about electricity. I know a lot about amps and like powering speakers. Start talking to me about plugins in the wall and I start going cross-eyed. So what's happening here is it's not a true square wave of power, but it's not a true sine wave of power. So a true sine wave, just like a sound wave, right? It goes up and then comes down, it goes up, and it's just going up and down nicely. If you've ever seen like a square wave from a synthesizer, that's what some power inverters put out. And this is a modified sine wave, so like it's not truly a perfect edged square wave, and it's not truly a sine wave. It's somewhere in between. Some stuff can handle it. What I found is anything I plugged directly into this hummed a lot, and in some cases didn't work. So I have specific amplifiers that I could use with this, and it worked, but it made a lot of noise. I used one of these. I used it every year for about 4 or 5 years in a parade. We threw, a few things in the back of my dad's truck, like a guitar amp and an electric drum kit with some speakers, aimed them out, and did a small town parade jamming on the back of a pickup truck. This did actually work really well for that, but I had to specifically pick what equipment I was going to be plugging into it. Now, it does have on the side of it, okay, loaded pretty quick. It does have, your cigarette lighter style DC jack there. I bought a pure sine wave inverter that I could plug into the side of this, and it did actually help quite a bit. It got rid of a lot of the noise But now I've got this big, heavy battery pack. I've got a secondary inverter plugged into the side of it, hanging out. And then I've got like just extra cables. And it wasn't ideal. And again, these are very heavy for what they are. But I got 4 or 5 years out of the thing. And I started, I had some battery issues with my car a few years ago and used this to boost it. Worked great. My dad's truck, its battery went and pulled this thing out, boosted it. Works great. So I'm hanging on to this thing, but it does have a current issue where as you're running it, I don't know if it's overheating or if it is the battery's draining real quick, but it starts like making some alarm noises after about 2 hours of use running only at like 10 watts. Because again, right, my wife needs it for a dehumidifier for a locker at a barn just to try to keep stuff from molding. And it's been acting up like crazy for that. The last few times that I've used this for my parade, it has almost ran out before the end of the parade, and the parade is 1 hour long, running at a pretty high volume. So I think the battery in it is just on its last legs for that, but it can output a lot. So if I hang on to it to boost vehicles with, it'll still have a use. So if you're in Canada and you're looking for like a really cheap solution, if you're okay with a bit of noise, these can actually be a really good in a pinch thing, and not a bad idea to have handy if you're a sound tech or DJ that's doing mobile work, because if you run into any battery issues for your actual like vehicle, having this handy is a lifesaver. But I, partially because of this guy here, am looking into a new power bank. So with these, almost all of these are going to be pure sine wave. Not all pure sine waves are created equal. So any unit you're looking at in these, I recommend looking up some reviews. There's one guy. Can I find this guy's channel? Hobotech. HBOB Tech. Well, this guy here that's loading super slow because that's just how my internet is. This channel is great. Any reviews you can watch of him when it comes to these power banks and stuff, highly recommended, because one of the tests he does is he plugs an acoustic guitar amplifier into them and starts cranking it up and seeing what the noise is like. And not all of these inverters are created equal. So even though some of them are doing proper sine waves, you may find that you're getting some weird noise that he actually tests. So any of these, check. But yeah, pure sine wave wins every time in terms of I want to be able to plug directly into it. I did look into something like this, right? Like if you just need something real small to, power a speaker over your, like a single hour cocktail hour, something like this is probably fine. God, my internet is running so slow. If I hit back again, is it going to collapse? But the outlets on this you can't see currently because exit page. You'll see on some of these they're kind of missing. They've got a hole so that you can plug a 3-prong outlet into them. Because these things aren't attached to the ground, sometimes that's a problem, sometimes it's not. It kind of depends on the piece of equipment. I personally am going to be aiming for something that has, a proper 3-prong plug to it, just for my peace of mind. But yeah, you can get away with the 2. And what you're looking for, and what I'm looking for, is It has to have the right amount of wattage available, right? The surge wattage, that's similar to peak power. It's kind of an imaginary number. Yeah. Useful to know, largely ignore it. The continuous output is what we're looking at. And for me, I need probably something that can handle about 300 watts. Ideally, a bit more. I did have an instance, not this past year, but I think it was 2 years ago, where my drummer on our endeavors, he hit a kick drum real loud, and it actually popped the breaker that was in my inverter. We peaked briefly over the 500 watt mark, and it powered down because that instantaneous hit. Oh, who knew? That was enough to knock it down. So that's why, like, the surge number is important for music stuff, because if your amps can put out enough power briefly to turn the things off, that can be a problem for you. Other things to consider, though, is the watt hour. Now, essentially, this is an oversimplification, but it's kind of a 1-to-1 ratio of, like, if I'm drawing 300 watts, a 300 watt hour battery will last an hour. Now, it gets tricky with audio. We're not running, like, this isn't like an electric heater that says, like, 700 watts on the side, and you flip the on button and it's pulling 700 watts from the wall almost instantaneously and continually. When I turn on an amplifier, it's drawing a couple watts to, like, spin its fans and things like that. And then when it's actually producing power to the speakers, right, then it's drawing that from the wall to convert to what it needs to and then send it to them. So here's the other side of some of this. A 500 watt amplifier isn't necessarily drawing 500 watts from the wall when it's putting out 500 watts of power. There's a whole bunch of math to do with voltage and all this other stuff. But just know this. You're not always putting that out either, right? Even if you have a 500 watt amplifier set up and it's putting 500 watts out to each side, yeah, that's at, like, when that kick drum really hits. That's what it's actually putting out. So when you're hitting that snare drum and you're making those high frequencies, that's using less power than when you're hitting the kick drum and it's making those low frequencies. And when you're talking and it's using those frequencies, so different frequencies take more power to reproduce because of the way that the speakers work and how much power is needed to, right? There's a reason why bass amps need so much more power than guitar amps do. Yeah, and there's also a reason why, if you actually look at how many watts they're putting into the high frequency drivers on a lot of speakers, it'll be like some cases a 5-to-1 ratio. But I digress. So the maximum output matters. Keep a very close eye on the watt hours, because that is how you determine how long these things are going to last for your use case. What I would assume would be a rule of thumb, if you're running, say, a 500 watt PA system and your unit is telling you that it has, say, a 500 watt hour battery, you can probably get 2 hours out of it running at that, like, fairly pinned up. So some things to keep in mind. Now, I know somebody out there is thinking this, I could go and get something like the Everse, right? Get something that runs off of battery power itself. That thought had crossed my mind. And when you look at some of the really expensive options, right? Because again, these are going to be much cheaper in the States. But like this Jackery 1000, that's got like 1,000 watt hour, has, it can put out, 1,500 watt AC power. God, I would love one of these. Yeah, that justifies very quickly. What are they going for in Canada? Electro Voice Everse. Everse. Let's do with the 8. So in Canada, the Everse 8 is $950. Now, the battery in here. So, amplifier rating 400 watts. It's probably not actually pulling 400 watts. Let's just remember that. Up to 12 hours at 95 decibels. Or 6 hours output at 121. That's awesome. That's really good, right? That is a ton of time. That's why I'm saying you're not actually drawing 400 watts at any given moment. You're drawing between 10 and probably, this is my guess, I could be wrong, Does Dan have some of his numbers wrong? Dan might. This is only an 86.4 watt hour battery? The hell? Now, because it's wired directly into the circuit, it's probably running very, very efficiently. But they're claiming that you can get 12 hours off of an 86 watt hour battery running at 95 decibels. So my guess... Yeah, but 12 hours... Yeah, there's some wonky math going on here. I'm actually going to test. Okay, so here's my pledge to you all. I'm going to look into some of these. Yeah, and the next time I've got a PA system that can handle one of these, I'm going to test this time on it. By PA system, I mean here's what's probably going to happen, because I only need something that can last an hour. And seeing this number here, this opens my eyes a little bit. Man, this thing only pulls 350 watt RMS. So if I'm running it at roughly this same, pinning it up into that 120 dB range. No, we're thinking of, like, if I set the thing at 95 decibels, I'm going to be curious. If I get something that's like 200 watt hour, can I get 6 to like potentially 12 hours? I'm going to test this. Essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, when I get this guy and when I get whatever power bank I get, because again, I need something that can last 1 hour. That's all I need. That's it. Like, I need a unit that I can run for those parades and on events that I'm doing my ceremonies on. That's it. That's all I need. So if I get something that's like 200 watt hours, I'm far less worried about it now. I just need to make sure that I have something. So what I'm going to essentially do, I'm going to grab myself something that is in the ballpark of, like, I know this is going to make it at least that time, right? Like maybe this EcoFlow, I've heard good things about this company. It's kind of, so this is a bit of an aside, but everything I've heard, Blueetti, Anker, Jackery, these EcoFlow guys, those are the ones to keep an eye on. Some of these brands that I've never heard of, and neither have you, be careful of, right? This one might be good. It has a lot of decent reviews. Some, you can never trust those 100%, but there was one that made me laugh. Oh, did it get removed? I would love it. I would love if my example was already gone. Oh, I think it's gone. Oh, no, there it is. I'll give you a guess what this is supposed to look like. Right? Everything about this looks like a Jackery, but there's no name brand on it anywhere. Oh man, this site's having a day. But stop it. But yeah, I'm willing to guess that some of these images and stuff on here are gonna be almost the same as well. But yeah, avoid these name brand ones, or sorry, no name brand ones. Like Anker makes good stuff. These Blueettis get pretty good reviews. Jackery is kind of the king of these, from everything I've heard. So, yeah, but I'm actually going to experiment a bit. I'm going to see how long I can power a PA system at a decent volume. And we're going to go from there. Because, yeah, in my head, I'm like, yeah, like I should be able to get 2 hours maybe out of a like 500 watt hour battery running 250 watt PA system through it. But if it's 400 watt, which that's 400 watt peak, so probably 200 watt RMS speaker running considerably low, right? Because so 121 decibels versus 96, that is almost 3 times the volume. That's 2.5 times the volume, which means roughly, like, let's just call it twice the volume. That means this is running to get this 12 hours, assuming, this is some bad napkin math, but assuming what they're telling us about the amplifier being rated for 400 watts is true, that means this is at 400 watts, this is at 2? Maybe 4? So here's where I get that math. If this is 400 watts, you gain 3 decibels every time you double your power. So it takes it takes 10x 100. Ugh, my brain takes 10x the power. So if this is 121, 111 takes 40, which means 101 takes 4. So yeah, this is in like 2 watt territory. if my napkin math is right. Now that's pure output. That's not input wattage and like power draw, because nothing's 100% efficient. But yeah, like if this 400 watt PA can get 12 hours out of an 86 watt hour battery at 95 decibels, which is fine for background music, right? Like that's like we're running this in the, backyard kind of volumes, and everybody can hear it, but it's not loud. If it can do that, then yeah, my 200 watt hour batteries that I'm planning on getting are going to be drastically. I think I have some drastic length to it. But yeah, so I'm going to test this out a little bit. My channel is not big enough to get a sponsorship, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to buy something with my own money. But, we will see how that all goes. I'm leaning now towards a 200-ish watt hour battery. I was going to go bigger, but for my purposes, I don't actually know if I care. So I'm also going to see what pops up on a good deal. I almost bought this one, but this $70 coupon was $120 a few days ago. And I was like, oh, I'll pick that up when I get back from, like, I went on a trip, like, a few hours away. And, like, I got back yesterday, and I looked this up this morning, and it's, like, the 48 hours, and the price changed by $50. Gross. So I'm going to keep an eye on that particular one, because if I can get this one, although that, so 300 watt, but only 204? So I might go for, I may end up, I might be researching this a little bit this afternoon. Because 600 watt AC, more than enough. 256 watt hour battery, more than enough. And this is crashing again. I gotta stop streaming here. Because once again, TELUS is terrible. Don't sign up with them for internet or cellular. Their customer service is awful, and their apparently internet connections are horrendous. I can't tell if it's my modem or router because they're both plugged into the same thing. Actually, okay, so this is having some weird, crazy speed issues. I've got something running on Wi-Fi right now. I'm just going to leave the stream up for a second while I... Yeah, so I can't even connect to speed test. Like, I Googled speed test, and I'm stuck in the screen, the wobbly bit there. But I am still streaming. And then on my phone... Oh, my camera turned off. I don't know why it did that. My phone is getting like 100 megabits per second and an upload speed of 6. So my phone is getting far more on the Wi-Fi. This is a router issue. Okay. Well, my camera turned off, and I don't know why. It probably has a limited time on it, and I've been